This happened in the fall of 2021 when I was living alone in a rented townhouse in southern Illinois. It was my first experience living by myself, and even though I was technically an adult, 27 years old with a full-time job and a stable routine, the idea still made me nervous. I had just gone through a rough breakup and thought that silence and solitude would help me process everything. The townhouse was part of a small row of identical units, simple but clean and quiet, tucked away in a cul-de-sac not far from a rural highway. The neighborhood had that sterile, subdued vibe. Beige vinyl siding, trimmed bushes, wind chimes, and mailboxes with stenciled last names. Mostly elderly people, but a few young families as well. I didn't really know any of my neighbors, and I liked it that way. I kept to myself. But almost immediately, I noticed one person who stood out. He lived 3 doors down. A tall, heavy-set man, probably in his 40s, with a scruffy beard, and a strange habit of standing outside at night, sometimes pacing or smoking, sometimes doing nothing at all, just staring. When I pulled into my driveway around 9 or 10 p.m., he'd often be there, leaning on his porch railing or standing at the edge of his driveway, looking at the street. He never waved, never smiled. Even if I looked right at him, he just kept staring. I tried to ignore it. A couple of times I mentioned it to friends or to my mom, and they said maybe he was just a night owl or had insomnia. But he scared me. He was always watching, never participating. And it wasn't just that he was there. It was the stillness. He didn't shift, didn't check his phone, didn't move, just stood there like a statue. I kept telling myself not to be paranoid, but the feeling grew stronger over time. Then the sound started. It was around mid-September. I had just gotten home after a long shift. I worked late, managing warehouse inventory. Usually got in around 10:30. Exhausted, grabbed a bite, and crashed. That night I fell asleep around midnight. At 2:37 a.m. exactly, I woke up to a sound I can only describe as metal scraping against wood. At first, I thought I'd dreamed it, but then I heard it again, a long, slow creaking sound, like an old gate opening. My bedroom was on the ground floor, at the back of the unit, and it had a sliding glass door with vertical blinds that led to a small fenced-in yard. I sat up. The dispatcher was calm, took my address, and said officers were on their way. I stayed crouched in the dark, barely breathing. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flickered across my front window. I got up, opened the door, and met the 2 officers outside. I told them everything, what I'd heard, when it happened. One walked around to the backyard while the other stayed with me and asked questions. The officer out back came back and said the gate was shut, no signs of tampering, no damage. He said he'd write a report, just in case. One of them actually said, probably just a raccoon, and gave me a look like I was wasting their time. I didn't argue. They left after about 10 minutes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked the backyard myself. That's when I noticed something strange. A flat stone, about the size of a paperback, had been wedged under the gate to stop it from closing fully. Normally, the gate had a heavy spring that snapped it shut automatically. The rock looked deliberately placed, like someone had propped it there so they could slip in later without making noise. I picked it up and threw it across the yard. I called the police again and told them what I found. They said they'd add it to the report, but again, said there was nothing they could do. I asked if they could talk to neighbors or check for cameras. They said no. Unless a crime occurred, they couldn't investigate. 2 nights later, it got worse. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up again, this time to the sound of my back door handle turning. First gently, like someone testing it, then harder, like someone trying to open it. I sat up, heart pounding. I couldn't see anything through the blinds, but I felt someone was standing on the other side. My mouth went dry. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called the police again. While I waited, I crouched in the hallway, out of sight. I didn't have a gun or a dog, just that stupid kitchen knife. The motion light clicked on, and through a small gap in the blinds, I saw a shadow move across the glass. A man. He didn't run, didn't hide. He just stood there. The same 2 officers showed up again. This time, they found footprints in the gravel, big ones, leading right up to the door. But again, no entry, no crime. They said they'd increase patrols and told me to keep my doors locked. The next day, I installed cameras, one over the back door, another over the front porch. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in the dark living room, watching the feed on my phone. 2:14 came and went. Nothing. But at 2:23, the back camera activated. A man stepped. They watched the footage and admitted it was disturbing. But again, no break-in, no damage, no weapon, nothing they could act on. They wouldn't even ask the guy down the street to check his doorbell cam. I begged them. They said their hands were tied. That night, I packed a bag and slept in a hotel. When I returned the next day, I found 4 muddy handprints on the glass door. Too high, too low, like someone crouched and rested their hands there, watching. I moved out a week later, broke the lease, forfeited the deposit. I didn't care. I couldn't spend another night there. The final straw was the note I found in my mailbox the day I left. Handwritten on lined notebook paper, cramped lettering. It said, "The cops leave, but I don't." I filed one last report. The officer that time looked genuinely unsettled. He promised to do a wellness check on the area, but it was too late. I never went back. About a month later, I got a Facebook message from a girl named Kayla. She said she was the new tenant who'd moved into the unit after me. "Hi, sorry to bother you. I think you used to live here. Did you ever have someone in a black hoodie hanging around the backyard? I keep hearing footsteps at night, and last night someone knocked in the glass door around 2 a.m. and just stood there." I didn't reply. I didn't want to know what happened next.